Hello, my name is Sajjan Kanukolanu. I'm with Position Squared. What I have today is actually a presentation that I did at SMX East in New York City this October, a couple of weeks ago. Clearly, given that you're watching this, you are interested in knowing more about SEM analytics, which is the primary topic of the presentation. What I've done here, though, under the larger umbrella of the analytics, I have primarily focused on one core element, and that is about consumer-centric analytics that will help digital marketers build successful landing pages. As digital marketers, we all know that landing pages are very important to us. And a lot of times, we actually look at a lot of metrics that are front-end metrics from Google AdWords, and we actually look at conversions that are captured within AdWords, as well as conversions that are picked up by your marketing automation systems or those that are stored in your CRM. What tends to happen, though, a lot of times is in looking at these conversion numbers, people tend to forget the importance of landing pages, or they adopt a strategy that's less data-driven and a lot to do with experience, instincts, what we think might work, or the conventional wisdom that's out there in the market. What I have today is essentially a presentation that's going to show you how you can defy the conventional wisdom as you look at building successful landing pages for your digital campaign. Before we get into the depth of it and start covering the presentation, let me quickly tell you what I do. I'm a former product design engineer, and I did design engineering for about 2 years. And in those 2 years, I realized while I love to use great products, sitting in a lab and designing those was definitely not my cup of tea. I soon realized I couldn't see that as my career long term, and therefore I left the gig, started MBA, and as luck would have it, I ended up in digital marketing. I did a lot of sales and marketing roles and got an opportunity to get into digital marketing soon after that, and this was in New York, where I worked with a company called Did It Search Marketing. I've also worked with Neo at Ogilvy, and over the course of the last 15, 16 years that I've been in the space, I work with companies like Wonderman as well as Razorfish. Today, I work for a company called Position Squared, and I am the VP of Global Delivery. I lead planning and strategy at Position Squared. Position Squared is a demand acceleration agency that's based in Silicon Valley, and we help B2B and B2C businesses accelerate demand through channels like website, marketing automation, content, paid acquisition, which basically includes all your paid media channels. Now, as I built my career in digital, what I realized is, like famous rapper Jay-Z said, I got 99 problems. What I realized is, yes, as digital marketers, we have a lot of problems, but data is never an issue. What I mean by that is we have enough data on our hands. It's all about how you capture the data, how you analyze the data, how you draw insights from it, and how you really go about utilizing it to improve your campaigns. So my presentation today is primarily talking about how we can use some of the analytics data to build successful landing pages. And what I have here is actually a success story from one of our clients that's in the SaaS space. And I'm going to show you how we gather the data, what are the tools we used, and how we took that information and really built a very compelling landing page that increased the conversion rate significantly. One thing that's important to note in this is SaaS companies are considered sort of the leaders in the digital space. What I mean by that is they're sort of at the forefront of digital marketing. A lot of what they do and the leads they get and the conversions they obtain are through digital, 100% digital. And this is a research from Boston Consulting Group that was released just recently while I was in New York a couple of weeks ago. The Boston Consulting Group research also tells us that SaaS companies have 3x the mobile conversion rates or conversions that are influenced by mobile as compared to large enterprises that are considered laggards in the market when it comes to digital marketing specifically. So it made sense for us to really show you and share this case study with you today because this is of a SaaS-based client of ours. So let me paint the scenario here. What we had is a situation where We had 54% of traffic coming in from mobile for this client with a conversion rate of just about 1.4%, and that's on mobile. And we had a situation where 42% of the traffic came from desktop, but the conversion rate was right about 4% there, pretty high. So when you look at this data, it's obvious that desktop is doing much better than mobile in terms of the overall conversion rates. And conversion rate in this case was essentially a form fill resulting in a lead that would then be picked up by the client and the sales folks, and they would sort of nurture to a closure. Clearly, given the performance we saw on mobile, we wanted to really focus on identifying ways to increase the mobile conversion rate. So that was our objective in this situation. And what we decided to do was increase the overall mobile conversion rate, which essentially meant we wanted to increase the form fills for this customer. As we got down to identifying a way to increase the conversion rate, it was pretty obvious that landing page is the way for us to go. What I mean by that is we wanted to really focus on landing page improvement that would help increase the overall conversion rate. As we started planning this out on how we want to go about doing a high converting landing page for this customer, we realized that there's enough conventional wisdom out there in the market. We realized that there are a lot of best practices that are talked about. There are folks talking about a lot of experiences they have when it comes to landing page development. And when we started taking these points and writing them on a whiteboard, what we realized is these conventional wisdoms sort of fall in 5 key buckets. And I'm going to show those to you now. The first conventional wisdom basically said you have to have simple landing pages where the form is prominently placed because we want our audience to fill the form when they come to the landing page. The second one said you have to have a CTA that's always above the fold. So your call to action needs to be visible above the fold. As soon as the user lands on it, they click on it, they fill the form, voila, you have a conversion, right? That's sort of the conventional wisdom. You also have a train of thought or a theory out there that says you need to avoid long form content, which basically means you want to give just enough content to the audience so that they don't get distracted. And of course, there's a huge debate about, hey, do I send my traffic to dedicated landing pages versus a landing page that's part of a website, right? There's this whole controversy about, am I going to distract the audience with top navigation and things like that? I'm going to show you some examples that actually sort of demystifies that, what I like to call the myth, if you will. The fifth category of conventional wisdom that we came up with was you have to minimize the overall interactions and visuals on a landing page because those are considered as distractions. So the train of thought is you have to limit distractions on a landing page, and the way to do it is by reducing or minimizing your visuals and interactions that you have on a landing page. As we went through these 5 categories, if you will, what we understood and what we realized is that these were all advertiser-centric and not audience-centric. So what do I mean by that? If you look at each of these points, what these are saying is as you get a prospect or a user onto your landing page, you want a form fill. As an advertiser, you want a form fill done very quickly. And as a result, you're saying, I want to do these things that will result in the audience filling a form for me very, very quickly, as opposed to them just abandoning the page. What we are not thinking about there is what is the user experience that we want to give when our prospects land on our page. And therefore, we call these advertiser-centric and not necessarily audience-centric. So let me show you how we went about sort of defying the conventional wisdom. And we built a framework that helped us do that and really help us focus on building a landing page for our client from an audience point of view. This is Position Square's 4-step audience-centric framework. And as you can see, it moves from sort of low impact to high impact, and I'll explain that in just a second. And there are 4 steps here. The very first step is to identify the right tools. Like I said earlier, there's enough data out in the market. I think it's all about how you gather the data and how you use the tools to gather that information and use those tools to actually analyze the data itself. So the step number 1 in our framework is to pick the right tools. These tools should help you understand the audience behavior. That's step number 1. Number 2, you have to analyze the audience and the behavior through interactions. And this basically helps you understand the pain points. Because what you're doing now is you're analyzing the interactions that happen on a landing page. As a result, when you do a deep dive into those interactions, you will be able to understand what the pain points are. Number 3 is, once you understand the audience pain points, the next step is for you to give them the experience that helps alleviate those pain points. And therefore, the logical third step is to have the right UI UX decisions made that will help you design a new, in this case, a landing page experience that will help sort of fix those pain points. And finally, the fourth one is going with user testing, which basically means you have a new design, you need to get that out in the market and test it out with your current design. And in doing so, what you do is essentially you're listening to your audience. You're listening to your audience feedback in real time, where they interact with your old landing page experience, in this case, and the new landing page experience. Therefore, when you listen to the feedback, you're in a great position to take that data and continue to refine the experience that your audience gets, which basically means you get to do a lot more testing in the future. As you look at this, you'll notice that tools by themselves really don't do much. I mean, they're gathering data for you, but by themselves, tools by themselves really don't give you a lot of insight. What gives you insight about your audience are the next 3 steps, and then progressively those become high impact. What I mean by that is, as you analyze the interactions and you understand the pain points, you go about fixing the pain points through new designs, which is much more higher impact than the tools themselves. Finally, when you actually test and you learn and you listen from what your audience are saying, that's the most impactful, because you're now able to take those learnings, you're able to listen to the feedback and give them a better experience in the future. And therefore, it makes sense to keep these 4 steps, starting from low impact to high impact. So now that we know the 4 steps, let me walk you through how we implemented these in this real scenario. The number 1, as you saw earlier, was the tools. Clearly, AdWords, Bing, and all the front-end data that you get from these search engines or social ads platforms give you a plethora of information about the performance of the campaign, which we consider a pretty basic numbers or data points, just because now when you actually think about the audience, you have to go way beyond those basic metrics. And for those, you need the right tools. So as you look at going beyond the basic data, there are a few tools that I'm going to show you here that will help you really gather the right information and analyze the audience performance or behavior on your landing page. So clearly, Google Analytics, as you all know, is a great tool. It's phenomenal in the kind of information it gathers. It gives you a lot of information about the audience behavior, and I'll show you with examples what I mean by that. In this case, the second tool we used was Hotjar, which we think is a phenomenal tool to gather visual data on how the audience is interacting with your landing pages. Finally, the third tool we used here was VWO, Visual Website Optimizer, which is a fantastic tool to set up tests and run tests on a regular basis. So we use these 3 tools to improve the overall landing page experience for the audience for this client. So let's start looking at the information or the data points that we analyze to understand the behavior of the audience. This data is from Google Analytics, and what we see here is Google Analytics is telling us there are a high number of new visitors coming in from mobile, about 95% here. Google Analytics is also telling us that there's a high bounce rate from mobile traffic. This is sitting at about 88.8%. I would almost put it at 90%. And that's pretty high. 90% bounce rate from mobile is quite significant. Something to worry about. What we also found interesting was when it came to mobile traffic, the overall engagement was just about 22 seconds. But when we looked at desktop, which is this row, it's about 51 seconds. So we're getting close to a minute, which is, we think, reasonable enough for someone to land on a page, read it, fill the form. And therefore, the fact that desktop had 4% conversion rate sort of starts making sense now. Once we got this data, we said, this is great. We can do something about this information, but more importantly, as you look at it from an audience point of view, this is just telling us that the audience is coming to the landing page and they're leaving. This is not telling us the overall experience that they have on the landing page. Therefore, we wanted to do a deep dive into the data from Hotjar. And to do that, we first looked at desktop because the conversion rate was much higher there. We wanted to use that as a benchmark. And then we looked at mobile. So this is how the desktop interactions looked based on the data that we got from Hotjar. What we saw here is there's very little activity or very little interaction on the top navigation. Very few people are really worried about it. Very few people are clicking on it. So technically, it's not bothering people. And this is a page that's part of the website. So what we found out here is top nav is not necessarily hurting the overall campaign because there's just very little interaction. So either you have it or not, looks like it doesn't matter in this case. What we did notice on desktop was there was quite a few interaction here on the content. As you can see, there's a little bit of activity there, but a lot more activity on the form, which sort of explains 4% conversion rate, which is basically 4% form fills. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of activity on the submit button, which again tells us that quite a few people are filling the form and clicking on the submit button. While this is great, we also wanted to look at another data set, and what that was the heat map. What you notice here is whatever you see in red up top is telling us that 100% of people landing on the page have viewed that section. And as you progressively go down on the page, you notice different color themes, which basically tells us that fewer and fewer people are looking at the content below the top fold. And as you can see, by the time folks get to the submit button, you have about 55% of folks looking at this form, which we think is not bad given the high conversion rate of 4% on desktop. With these insights on desktop, we wanted to look at how mobile trend looked like. So as we looked at the mobile device, what we realized is there was a little bit of activity on the hamburger menu right up top, not really a whole lot going on the content, which was concerning to us. Unlike desktop, people were not necessarily interacting with the mobile content here. But as folks scroll down on their mobile devices on the page, there was quite a bit of activity on the form. Now this is great information. It tells us that people are clicking on the form, and it might actually, in a way, mislead as if you were to rely on just this information, because now you're saying, hey, if I got so much activity on my form, why am I not getting conversion rates? So chances are you might start looking at tracking or start going back to your own campaign setup and start fiddling with that or trying to sort of make changes there as opposed to really focusing on the landing page. So in order not to get distracted by this data, what we did is we actually looked at the heat map data from Hotjar. And this is where things get really interesting. What this shows us is clearly there is 100% view here. All the red section basically says 100% folks who land on the page are actually viewing that. And as you progressively scroll down on the page, you see different color patterns, which tells us that fewer and fewer people are seeing the sections below the main fold. But what's more interesting is as they scroll down and they got to the form, less than 40% viewed beyond the first 4 fields on the form. Let me say that again. So the form had about 7 to 8 fields. Less than 40% saw beyond the 4 fields, the top 4 fields in the form. This is powerful information because now you know that many people are dropping off right after the 4th field on this landing page. And that information is powerful because now you can use that insight to actually build a new landing page. With this information in mind, we started laying out a landing page development plan. As we looked at building the landing page based on the insights we just gathered, what I just showed you, we started looking at the conventional wisdom. And we said, this is a great opportunity for us to really show how we have defied the conventional wisdom and how we came up with a completely new way of designing landing pages. And therefore, what I've done is I've put the conventional wisdom on one side so we can do an apples to apples kind of comparison here and show you what else did we do when it came to this particular strategy. Number one, we were focusing on mobile. So this was a mobile specific strategy. And instead of going with the conventional wisdom of saying, we want to offer simple landing pages with a form that is prominently placed, we said, let's actually focus on content. Let's make content the priority. We did not want to have a landing page experience where content was not prominently visible, content was not helpful to our audience. Number two, we all know that CTA, call to action, is a very important piece of any landing page experience. But conventional wisdom tells us that CTA needs to be always above the fold. We wanted to do something more radical. So we said, we are going to have a CTA, but we're going to make sure the CTA is not the only experience for the audience as they get to the landing page. Conventional wisdom tells us we have to avoid long form content, but let's be honest here. If you're looking at mobile, we all scroll up and down on our mobile devices. So why not have the long form content? And therefore we said, because scrolling is so native to a mobile behavior, we are going to give them enough content so they can scroll, understand the product. We were pretty sure it would lead to a higher conversion rate because now you're giving a much better experience to your prospect. And as I said earlier, there's this whole debate about dedicated landing page versus a landing page that's part of your website. And what we said here is, let's not worry about that. We will go with sort of a mobile first landing page experience where we are essentially building this page for mobile first and then adapting that page to a much bigger screen. We did not want to avoid visuals. We wanted to make sure that there were enough visuals on the page that would help the audience make the right decision and help the audience fill the form. Unlike the conventional wisdom, which basically tells us that the visuals or interactions can be distracting, we actually wanted to do the opposite of that. We wanted to make sure there was enough interaction, enough visuals on the landing page that we were pretty positive would actually help increase the overall conversion rates. While we defied the conventional wisdom with these steps in our strategic approach, we also considered a few other critical elements when it comes to mobile. We wanted to make sure that the mobile experience had a much faster load time than it did when we started this program. Therefore, load time of the page was critical importance for us as we planned this strategy out. We also wanted to make sure that we used lightweight images, which then assist a faster load time. The design and the creative teams really thought through that in building this landing page. And finally, it's all about keywords. We wanted to make sure we had the right keywords embedded in the landing page so there was a high keyword ad and landing page relevance. So we took this strategy and went to our design team. This is the data-driven concept that they came up with. As you can see, they built out 3 different scrolls on the landing page. Scroll 1 had a logo, some information, it has a CTA. There was scroll 2 and 3 planned out as well. And finally, there was a form fill also planned out for this campaign. With the data we provided and the insight we got from the data, our creative team came up with this final design. And it looked something like this. What you see here is there is pretty good information about what the product is about. Very crisp 3 lines or 2.5 lines. We got a very small paragraph that sort of explains the product. What's interesting is when you scroll down, the experience looks something like this. What you see is you see images and you see a little bit of text under those images that are basically explaining you the benefits, features, and why you should essentially go sign up for this product. Another important thing for you to note is during this experience, you have the CTA or call to action button stuck on the screen. So we did not worry about should we put the CTA on the top, the bottom. We said, let's make it a sticky CTA, which is basically available to the audience as they scroll on the mobile, and it's right there, very close to their thumb, so that as they scroll up and down, if they want to sign up, if they want to fill the form, they just click on the CTA. Another thing that you notice, as the audience scrolls up and down, there is no form. So we did not prioritize the form, we prioritized the experience. So when the audience was ready, they got the right information, they clicked on the CTA, and that then overlaid a form on top of the page that they were viewing earlier. And as you can see, there are only 4 fields. The data showed us that less than 40% of people were going beyond the 4 fields of the form that we had. Therefore, we said we'll just go with 4 fields and make that the form. Once this page was up, the numbers looked something like this. We noticed that we reduced the bounce rate by 23%. So now we were sitting at 68 from about 90% or so that we had before. And on mobile, we noticed that the overall engagement increased by 118% to 48 seconds, which seems reasonable, much better than 22 seconds that we had earlier. As a result, our overall conversions or conversion rate increased by 2x. So by taking in the audience-centric data, by really thinking about what the audience's issues were with the landing page experience, and by using this framework which had 4 key elements. The tools that will help you understand the behavior. Second, understanding the interactions of the audience, which will help you get insights into the pain points. 3, making the right UI UX decisions, which will help you fix the pain points. And 4, by doing continuous testing, where you gather feedback and you optimize your pages further. By using these 4 steps, we were really able to increase the overall conversion rates for this audience. Therefore, the audience-centric approach is key to a successful digital marketing campaign. With that, I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Here's how you can do that. You can write to me on Twitter. It's at kvsajjan. Feel free to drop us a note at Position2 on Twitter. Or drop me an email if you have any questions. It's sajjan@position2.com. Or go to our website, www.position2.com, to learn more about how we help digital marketers accelerate demand. Thank you.